Hello, and welcome to Spirit Talks, the segment of Spirit Speaks where we get to share all things spirit with very special guests. And today we're blessed to have our beloved Kenneth Winfrey with us, who will be talking with us about grief and as it relates to spirit. As you know, the month of March is the month where we explore the spirit of grief. And Kenneth, whose background is deep, varied, and exceptionally comprehensive around all things, both psychological and spiritual, is going to shepherd us through a deeper exploration of the nature of spirit and grief. And I'd like to open this with a quote from our beloved Reverend Imani. What we have lost over this last year, we've lost our jobs, our homes, our loved ones, our ideas about what life is, and what we thought was true about our country and our democracy, what we thought was true about our fellow humans. When it all unravels, falls apart, crumbles before our eyes, what becomes possible? Can we even begin to entertain the possibilities if we have not grieved?
That's important. That's a compelling question to ask. Thank you, first of all, for being able to share space today with everyone. The first stage of grief is denial. What I believe is that denial is like turning down an RSVP from spirit, right? We've all said to ourselves, this isn't happening. When we see some unintended change occur, as we witness ourselves drinking too much money, drinking too much or spending too much money, eating too much, or just playing when we should be working. And it's sort of our way of saying, thanks God, but I have other plans, But for millions of years, the universe has been headed the way it is. And it's been headed this way with you in it. But yet we use our free will to kind of say no, and we don't even say thank you. Universe, I'll be over here while you're playing out your galactic destiny, right? But a friend from Canada, he would always say, what's that about? So he just passed on. So that's something that I'm experiencing grief right now. But I have that from him, that phrase that really asks me to ask myself what I'm doing, But I just think it's amazing that spirit has enough room in it for everything and to give us room to pretend that none of it exists, Denial, it comes to us as regret. It shows up as that coulda, shoulda, woulda, and it keeps us out of paying attention to what really is and the potential for who I am right now, So when I deny that experience of feeling who I am, I'm sort of robbing myself of knowledge of who I am. That phrase, know thyself, was inscribed on Kemetic and Egyptian temples in the ancient world for a reason. It was an invitation for us to embrace the gift of self.
So really there's an invitation there, like in that experience of denial, I can look for that invitation into a deeper knowledge of me and truths about me that I maybe have never even gotten the chance to explore before.
Yeah, that's the beauty of the complexity of loss.
We should maybe think about denial from a spiritual context as being analogous to spiritual bypass. And with spiritual bypass, what do we know is the spiritual principle to undo that false belief? Anybody? Clarissa, what do you think?
I should know, shouldn't I?
Well, it just sounds like, that knowledge of self means that I really know myself. If I know myself, I know I'm one with all that is, right? So, I just wonder, how denial, gets cooked up in our brains, even though I understand it as a scientist and as a provider, it's still kind of mysterious to me.
One of the things I turn to with spiritual bypass specifically as it relates to denial, being, the two being analogous, is that You know, we're often taught, again, to refer to Reverend Amani's quote, what may be real is not necessarily true. And what is true may not be necessarily manifest in reality as part of our experience. And part of the reason for that, you know, this is never an invitation to castigate or to, you know, punish or blame somebody for an experience they're having that's unpleasant. I want to be really clear about that. And I don't want to attach responsibility to people for the experiences they're having that they don't wish to be having. I just wish to share that when we decide that we're going to become in alignment with truth, reality tends to fall into place behind it. I had a recent sort of debate on Facebook, as Facebook wants to do, around the principle of Black Lives Matter and people attaching all lives matter and blue lives matter and these lives matter and those lives matter. And I said, look, here's the thing. Black Lives Matter is the truth. It is not a manifest reality. It's an affirmation. It's a declaration of truth being called into existence, whereas it has not yet become manifest. The reality is contradictory to that truth. And to go into a place of spiritual denial, of spiritual bypass, of denial, is say all lives matter, all, you know, and to not look at the reality of what's going on. And so when we decide that we're going to align ourselves with truth, then spiritual bypass dissipates to nothing. Denial vaporizes and is replaced by the demonstration of perfection of spirit. That's my take on the spiritual context, especially as it relates to grief and loss being an invitation from spirit, as you said.
Yeah, you can't do that like Pollyanna thing where it's like, okay, it's all good, it's all love, it's all wonderful, and deny the real human reality of what we're feeling and experiencing. And we do a disservice even when we well-meaning people coming from a good place and saying to somebody who's grieving, like, there's a gift in this for you, and it's nothing has gone wrong, because actually, like, something has gone wrong. The greater truth is that there's nothing wrong on the grander scale, but like, this sucks and this hurts, and to try to bypass that with some platitudes is actually harmful and is not compassionate or helpful to the person going through the grief.
Amen. Amen. That is perfect.
Or anger, which is the next stage of grief, actually. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I loved Kenneth, like, so tell us about your views on anger, because I've found anger to be, usually when I'm angry, there's some information there. There's something that I'm being shown that I need to know, you know, right, if I look into it.
Well, you know, I kind of think of anger as what's going on when things aren't the way I want them to be in my vision, right? So anger is this motivation to have a vision, but it's turned upside down. So when it's turned upside down, all that energy that I might use to make that vision manifest gets kind of spent in the frustration over what doesn't already exist. And so then we'll go back to that coulda, shoulda, woulda again, you know, but anger isn't wrong. Anger is not wrong at all. Anger changes things. Anger changes the world. Anger created the civil rights movement. Anger created feminism. Anger caused Jesus to overturn the money changers' tables, right? So anger is a powerful thing, and if the Son of God is entitled to be angry, then so am I. But yes, it is. It's indeed a memo that I haven't picked up. It's an alarm clock that won't stop until I wake up to my power to accept or change the world around me accordingly. You know, sometimes I'm angry about things I can't change, and I feel helpless in my lack of acceptance. But you know, if you're alive enough to be angry, there's something to celebrate, okay? One thing's for sure, if you're angry, you're alive. Some people believe that if you die angry, you become a saint, right? So we even believe that anger is immortal, okay? So I think there is something to be said that I don't know about that part, but I think that it can inspire us motivate us to protest, to dissent, and to love the world, to create something that works for everyone. So if you're angry about the world not working, then, we might ponder what we might accomplish or accept to make it better, or to make our experience of it better.
I would offer a little cliff note. That's a nod to our beloved treasurer, Kenneth Winfrey. No, I got a cliff note from Amani about this too. I have a few cliff notes I might throw out there. He writes that anger is inspiration and clarity that oftentimes is born out of disappointment, or in our case, loss and grief. And I think that's beautiful, because as all the illustrations you enumerated around, the anger that motivates you to see something change. Angela Davis says, I no longer accept the things I cannot change. I change the things I cannot accept. That's inspiration. And that's beautiful. I really appreciate how you, perfect illustrations. That's excellent. Thank you. So tell us, what is the next step? We're going, and by the way, we're going in order of, sequence around the 5 stages of grief, but maybe you want to speak to the fact that in truth, they're completely nonlinear. They loop around on themselves. You might be all in one place.
The stages of grief are not polite enough to show up in order or just one at a time. For men, depression shows up as anger. For a lot of people, depression shows up as anger. I can find myself getting a quick fix by shopping for a bargain, but ultimately the purpose of grief is to transform that denial into acceptance. So that's what it's for.
Mm-hmm. So what is the next stage of grief?
So the next stage of grief is bargaining, okay? And so, bargaining is something that makes people nervous when they go shop for a car, right? Well, it is kind of a precarious process. And in spiritual work, bargaining becomes begging God or beseeching prayer. And in the science of mind, we teach that that's not necessarily the approach that brings us the best use of the law. So God is this infinite mother that contains all that we've ever needed, right? So when I know this, I know that I need not offer any bargains. Love is unconditional. Love is all there is. Real love knows no compromise, all right? So I won't bargain with my tears when they flow. I'm not hearing denial as an opportunity not to feel. I'm knowing that I don't need to bargain. I won't bargain with who I am for me to know, and I will not bargain with my tears when they need to flow. I'm a child of the universe, sent to commune with my fellow humanity as we learn over and over again what love really is. So, I ask, are you a bargain, or are you this season's best couture? Because as a unique being, there can be no bargain. A bargain denies the infinite wonder of who we are and all that we experience. So you see, in an abundance of love, you can be couture at any price. And that price will always be just right, okay? So when you offer love at the emotional marketplace of relationship, you do not have to accept any bargains. There's already an infinity of space and time paid for you to be here just the way you are. There's no need to bargain. If you want to cry, cry. If you want to shout, shout. You can't be a loss in the abundance of living. And the future is always trying to give us more than the last time, because the universe is growing, its offers are growing, and so are we. So I know this loss isn't about a bar to my gain. It's just about my gain. It really is.
Kenneth, that's so beautiful. You made me cry. That was so poetic. And it just made me think about the fact that I'm worthy. Like, there's nothing that I have to do to earn that unconditional love. Like, it is mine by divine birthright. And I already contain all of it. So wherever I'm at, it's enough. I'm enough. There's nothing that I have to prove. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And there we have the spiritual principle that undoes the misbelief around bargaining. We are worthy. We are one.
Yes.
It's beautiful. Go ahead and tell us about depression. I believe that's the next step in our pathway of grief.
That's the fourth step, right? Fourth step is like 40. It's like getting over the hill, right? Whew, it's gonna get better, y'all. Just stick with me. We got one more step to go. Depression. I always say depression is gratitude turned inside out. Okay. Anger is inspiration upside down. Depression is gratitude turned inside out. And it's this lie that something's empty or that something is worthless. Okay. So depression isn't like that word depreciation. My friend Cliff and I, we talk about that too a lot as fiscal people. It's this lack of appreciation. And when it comes to our spirit, depression asks me to ponder what I can celebrate. When the brain experiences depression, the chemicals that produce gratitude are actually out of balance. So meditation or maybe even medication can be the key. Depression is a well-known disease. We don't really realize how prevalent it can be. We also don't realize that denial, anger, and even bargaining can represent disease, especially bargaining with this oppression and theft. These things can be behind mental illness that need real treatment from a qualified professional, which can include a science of mind practitioner or another kind of professional. When these things are experienced outside of loss, it can be a medical problem. And depression and these other emotions and loss are different when they don't come from the brain. But when they come from the mind, we experience loss. And this unintended change seems to leave our minds behind a step or so, and we struggle with what just happened. It can take us out of the present moment into fear about the future as anxiety or regrets about the past and self-hatred, right? So being in the now means embracing the gifts of the present moment. Being in the now means I'm willing to accept this next experience. It means I'm moving through life and refusing to be stuck or bored with fear and regret. If no other way, say I've got to get angry enough to do something, and I'll trust that those unintended results are a signal for me to really just keep learning.
And speak to gratitude about that.
So gratitude is knowing that I'm alive. I'm alive. I can be sad. I can cry. This is all a part of what it means to be alive. Okay. So the depression is there. The feeling of sadness is there. After all the bargaining didn't work, maybe all my anger didn't change everything. So now I'm stuck, okay, with something that I don't want. And so depression represents, an opportunity to accept, and acceptance is about gratitude, and gratitude is about being in the now, because right now I may be depressed. Right now I can think that I'm depressed. Right now I can sit perhaps in shelter, hopefully on a chilly day, that I am present with myself. I can celebrate that maybe there are others who might be present to share with me in that sadness, or that I have the space to celebrate what I have in my solitude. So none of these things have to be wrong, and we can invite ourselves to change what it is that we're thinking about them.
It's so multifaceted. That just reminds me that when I'm present in the moment, I find that there can be gratitude, that sometimes the deeper the sadness, the deeper the beauty, that there's gratitude in all of it, and that there's joy, that there can even be joy in the midst of grief. Thank you.
Yep.
The reminder that we're alive, feeling. Right. The juice is in the feeling, right? That's where the power in the prayer is the feeling.
It. Yeah. When I can transform my depression into gratitude, when we grow what we practice gratitude around, right? And, quantum physics even supports the fact that when we start watching something, especially with appreciation, that it starts to increase, okay? So it doesn't require pushing or a bargain. We can get through it. And that's how we arrive at acceptance, okay? Which is the fifth and final stage.
Segue.
Yes, not forcing, but allowing, right?
Yep, because what do we do with the law? We allow it to happen, right? We're not pushing anything at all. We're allowing it to happen, okay? So acceptance is that decision, to receive the gift of life and all that it is. Without that bargain, I can release my anger with inspiration to share my gifts of perspective. My depression lifts as I practice the gratitude of celebrating my existence for its own sake. I celebrate being alive because I'm alive to celebrate. Okay. So the only real treatment goal in psychotherapy is acceptance. It's not just rolling over acceptance, though, because there's power in something that must also be accepted. When we talk about submission, for example, in Islam, it is rooted in the power of the will of spirit that is undeniable, inspirational, infinitely abundant, and made a place in this world for me before anybody knew it, right? So when I think of acceptance, I am reminded of the Serenity Prayer, which sort of sounds like what we mentioned earlier. The Serenity Prayer by Reinhold Niebuhr says, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference, okay? Now, where does that wisdom come from? That wisdom comes from within. It's an inside job. I know that the universe is made of what's inside me and around me. So I'm embracing myself as a whole, perfect, and complete sample of the universe through which I can get to know my world and myself at the same time as I truly accept the world and myself, okay? So if there is a bargain, it's I gotta love everywhere. I can't just love right over here. I have to accept myself as I am right here and my role to change it. I know that my greatest, most convenient source of knowledge is in me. And if the universe made me, then what else can I be but a beautiful mirror of its consciousness, beingness, vastness, richness, and power, right? So loss can be seen as in many different ways. I kind of liken it to what happens when a spider spins its web, okay? So spider spins its web, and the spider doesn't grieve the silk it lost to spin or some emptiness left within. On the contrary, it uses that silk to anchor itself in the experience of life, like the spider lady goddess that we associate with our second chakra. The silky memories of what is spun into this web anchors us in the experience of who we are. It allows us to look upon the vast connectedness of all that was, is, and will be, knowing that we are safely suspended among the stars and the moments of our lives. This silk this web is a mirror of our experiences over time, and it layers us with ring after ring after ring of experience that connects us to one another. So you really haven't lost anything. You've gained life experience and knowledge of self. And so we can celebrate all that you have outlived and endured. And we can liken it to this silken web and an amazing tapestry that's sort of this finely woven, divinely spun, best lived life. That's yours. You see, that's what it's about.
So grief and loss really truly are an invitation from spirit to go deeper into oneself and to find a more deeply rooted and anchored pathway to our connection with our birth from and our eternal relationship to the divine.
That's it, right?
That's beautiful. Clarissa, you had said something you wanted to share that Amani had written.
Yeah, so at the end of that blog post that she wrote, she had said, it is through our presence with all that is that we allow our holy wholeness to show up as love in action. And so that just made me think, being present with all that is, that includes pain and that includes grief. And so for me, being love in action is being willing to sit with my own pain or sit with somebody else's without, as Oriah Mountain Dreamer puts it, without moving to hide it or fix it or fade it. And just really recognizing that there's the invitation, that the grief itself is the invitation. It is this pathway. So if I allow myself to really just be with it, there's so much there for me in that. Like, we teach that the universe is always for us and never against us. And sometimes in the midst of pain, it doesn't feel that way. But if I can just be with what I'm feeling and let it be what it is, there's so much possibility that can be revealed.
Yeah, I sometimes make a distinction between empathy and compassion. Compassion is to be present with suffering without attempting to change it. Empathy sometimes invites us to make up what we think we're seeing. And so sometimes it's not really about acceptance. So I'm mindful of how I use these terms, but what you describe sounds more like how I define compassion.
Wow. Yeah.
In spiritual direction, we learn that empathy is passive. It's something that you experience without any, it's not a choice. It's something, it's a feeling. Compassion is an action. It's a definitive, deliberate movement towards deeper understanding of the person that you're working with. And that empathy allows us to feel another. Compassion empowers us to hold a space for another.
Yeah. And I loved what you said, Kenneth, about let's not grieve that we grieve, like grieve the fact that we do grieve, because I found too, like, the difference between pain and suffering. I suffer a lot more from my pain if on top of the pain I'm telling myself a story that I should be feeling something else, that something's wrong with me because I'm feeling this. And just thinking of compassion and being really compassionate with myself during my own grief process, and also being compassionate with myself in walking through with somebody else through their pain, because it's not an easy thing to navigate. But if we're coming from that place of compassion, we can support each other and allow ourselves to receive that support and get through it together. Yeah.
Oftentimes, pain is something that's promised as a part of our life. It's going to happen. Suffering is not necessarily required. Suffering is oftentimes something that we inadvertently choose and can choose away from, choose to say no to suffering, even in the midst of pain.
Yeah.
And grief is the way the human brain handles change. So that's why we don't grieve that we grieve. Because, as I said, this is an old model. It's as old as humanity. So it doesn't move fast enough with life, with the planet, with the sun, with the weather, with the people around us. So we show compassion to ourselves to allow ourselves to be reflective and to collect the part of ourselves that are stuck in the past, that fuels that grief. We're gentle with ourselves. So just imagine, if some of you will, as I have, a feather boa, right? It's long feather boa, right? You have to gently sort of coach it along with you as you move with it, the longer it is. So the more life you have, the more compassion you have the opportunity to show yourself.
Oh, I love that metaphor, Kenneth. And I love the metaphor of the spider goddess and weaving that web. Thank you so much for that beautiful imagery.
That is a perfect place to say thank you. Thank you, Clarissa. Thank you all who are watching this. And with the deepest love and gratitude, I say amen to all
Amen and namaste.
of you.
Boom.